Anna writes, my organization has a gift acceptance policy, but our policy is focused entirely on the organization's process for receiving contributions from donors and does not address board members and staff receiving personal gifts from the organization's vendors and contractors. Should this be prohibited, and should we add this to our current gift acceptance policy? Okay, Mike, I noticed this question has a little bit of a misconception or confusion that I do see a lot. The confusion is in the term gift acceptance policy. And there's a couple different things here. Your traditional gift acceptance policy, also called charitable gift acceptance policy sometimes, is, like this organization's, focused on the process for vetting new gifts. It will address whether some gifts are maybe too burdensome or complex or time intensive for the organization to accept, the circumstances under which you're amenable to a donor restriction, mostly about the process. Is staff empowered to do that? Does it need executive director approval? Some circumstances, does it need board approval? It will address some types of gifts that maybe the organization just doesn't accept because it's too much of a hassle. Maybe like gifts of land that are not liquid. That it's up to the organization. But that's your traditional charitable gift acceptance policy. Unfortunately, there's a lot of confusion with another important concept about staff members, board members accepting gifts in their personal capacity with people and companies that the organization does business with, which is also an important issue. It's unfortunate that the term gift acceptance kind of implies both or either, but these are two different issues and they should be addressed in two different policies. So I want to say that first. But Anna is getting at an important issue, having some language about staff, board members accepting gifts in their personal capacity. So before we get into that and how to think about that, do you have anything to add to my framing or reframing of the two different policies at play here?
I think your framing is really good, but I think also to reiterate one point that gift acceptance policies are documenting what you're, or vetting, I like that word, what you're not going to accept, and not documenting what you could accept.
Right.
Because it's the thing would go on forever. And even you can't document everything you can accept. And that's why I always like to remind people a gift acceptance policy from a charitable side is a living document. Something's going to come up and we go, oh, we got to make a change in our gift acceptance policy, so that doesn't happen again. So that's why I always say start small and all that. I do like a little sentence on the front end just to sort of state that we encourage gifts of, and that's where we can say just very generally of cash, assets that we can use in the organization's everyday operation.
Right.
And everything else is negative. I hate to say it. What we can't accept. And I think, so I just did want to, reiterate that point of view. I think, Ben, the key here that I've always struggled with is the two policies will show up in most organizations with the exact same name.
Right. Yeah. That is
a problem. And then it's not incorrect. And I always say, one resides in the employee manual,
right?
And a couple other, in policies, procedures. And one is a standalone policy that's outward facing, that a potential donor, you can share it with them, whereas our internal policy, and the internal one is pretty mechanical. You can, say we discourage that, or most of them have a set dollar limit, but I'm sure you're going to get into that.
Yeah. Well, and to be more clear, the aspect of accepting gifts from vendors and contractors in your personal capacity, that is mainly a conflict of interest issue, or at least that's the way I usually address it. It usually doesn't need its own, standalone page. I tend to address it as part of a conflict of interest policy because it gets that it's kind of a backdoor type of compensation, and it usually should get routed to, whether it's the governance committee or some other structure that the organization has set up, if it is something that needs to be evaluated. Often there will just be a rule that no, should never accept cash donations, and if it's a de minimis kind of trinket or gift, maybe there's allowance for that. But the point being, usually in the conflict of interest policy, you could put it in a code of ethics, something like that. But Mike, as I was reading the question, I remembered how often I see this kind of confusion. And I've been evolving towards an approach of, well, if the question keeps coming up, there's something to the confusion. And why not just kind of give a nod to it? So maybe in your charitable gift acceptance policy, put a line that says gifts should always be received by the organization through proper channels, should never accept gifts in your personal capacity, except as provided in the conflict of interest policy or code of ethics or something like that. Maybe point them to the right policy, have a nod to the issue because the question is going to come up. And even if it's duplicative, I've been leaning more in that direction just to deal with the fact that people do get confused, and it's understandable. What do you think about that?
100%. I think in general, outside of this question, cross-linking policies is a good idea. It closes some of the natural gray areas that are up there.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah.
Number two, Ben, I've gone the other way on the internal staff and board member gift acceptance policy and adding that to conflict of interest policy as an addendum or sitting there, not sitting by itself. Because one, I think you can button that thing up pretty quick. It won't have to change very often. Maybe in 20 years we'll change the dollar amounts from $10 to $20 or something, But I also think it helps put people on notice. Like, it's okay to go talk, a board member to talk to a potential new donor and go out to lunch or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But where do you cross that line?
With that, a whole other bunch of questions.
There's a whole thing. So that can get in there, but it's sort of also you're letting not every donor is trying to do something crazy or something. It's just like let them know where the line is so they can respectfully have that conversation.
Right.
And for some organizations, that number could be very small. Where you're not even allowed a cup of coffee, and that's okay. That's their culture.
Yeah.
And they say we're going to pay for each other separately. So I like that. You button it up, put it away, and it'll be fine. And then everything else becomes, the real focus is the gift acceptance policy for charitable donations coming in.
Right. There are some issues with the details around accepting gifts from vendors, contractors, donors in your personal capacity as a board member or staff member. That is a real potential problem because what it's getting at is commonly called a kickback. You don't want that. You don't want somebody kind of getting paid on the side to be induced to hire this or that person or do favors for a donor that are not appropriate. So that is real. Some of the issues I'll just flag real quick. There's usually some kind of de minimis for gifts in kind, like you're out to lunch. Maybe there's some trinket of very minimal value, $25 or less, or something that's not really going to create a problem. And it's just not worth having a rule that's so strict that it just inhibits your day-to-day operations. In my experience, though, there's really no reason to allow a cash gift to a staff member or board member from a vendor. So that should just be outlawed. Don't need to leave that for $25 or less.
Yeah,
or
it's
like
more again, Ben, sorry to interrupt, please.
Yeah, no.
It's more the perception than the actual dollar amounts. I mean, I don't care how people, if it's cash or barter sort of thing. But that's where it's a really good poster child for, be highly aware of how that transaction looks.
Right.